CASAA.org released a guide on battery safety tips. So there's been a lot of talk about battery safety lately because there seems to be a lot of stories in the news about these vape explosions. While the media claims that these explosions are caused by electronic cigarettes, the culprits are actually caused by improper use of the batteries that people are using in their devices. Look at any e-cig explosion in the news and you'll see that in every case, they're happening to people using mechanical mods or people carrying loose spare batteries in their pockets. I can't think of one example where one of these disasters happened to anyone using a regulated device or someone who carries batteries in a protective case. So with all of these stories in the media right now, it makes sense that CASAA.org would put out a guide to battery safety. So I'm going to run through some of the tips that they've compiled along with my own thoughts and insight for each tip. All right, tip number 1, every device has specific power requirements and you need to use the right batteries for your device. So I don't think this is a common issue since most devices only accept certain types and sizes of batteries like 18650s, but there have been several occasions where I've seen people on vape forums ask if it's okay to use 18650s that they found at places like Walmart. These batteries would be the Westinghouse 18650s, which are not designed to handle the voltage that we use in our vaporizers and would be very dangerous to use for our purposes. I recommend buying only batteries that Mooch recommends. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. All right, number 2, do not make any modifications to the device, including blocking ventilation slots. As far as blocking ventilation holes, you don't want to do that in case you have a battery failure. If a battery shorts to the point of venting, the gases wouldn't be able to escape and could lead to the device blowing up. So if you're putting stickers or a new wrap on your device, make sure that the vent holes are still open. And also with modifications, some modifications might require that you open up the device. And just like with any electronic device, you shouldn't open it if you don't have electrical experience. One reason would be that you could damage the board and cause a malfunction when you charge it or use the device in the future. And opening up a device would be especially dangerous in devices with built-in non-removable batteries because these batteries might be soldered in. If you take apart a device and the solder disconnects and the battery touches another piece of metal, it could short and vent. All right, tip number 3, buy high-quality batteries from a known source. Like I mentioned earlier, I highly recommend only buying batteries from Mooch's suggested batteries list. You also don't want to buy from sites like eBay because you might get batteries that have fake wraps on them. I suggest buying from sites like imrbatteries.com, illumin.com, Li-ion, wholesale.com, and encon.nl. Those are the best places you can go. If you want to buy from a vape vendor, rtdvapor.com and vapenw.com are generally trustworthy. And I'll include links to all of these in the show notes in case you didn't understand the URLs that I just said. All right, tip number 4, store batteries in a protective case or sleeve. So a lot of the battery explosions in the news are caused by loose batteries rolling around in pockets and coming into contact with metal of some kind like keys or coins. The batteries that we use for vaping are not like the alkaline AA or AAA batteries that we use in other electronics. The lithium-ion batteries that we use can short if metal comes into contact with the positive and negative parts of the battery. Sleeves and cases are really cheap, anywhere from 50 cents to a couple dollars, so it's worth it. All right, tip number 5, never exceed the rated capacity ratings of a battery and don't go by pulse ratings. Batteries have different ratings. The Sony VTC4, for example, is rated for 30 amps continuous. Some batteries might claim upwards of 50 amps pulse, but this isn't a safe rating because pulse ratings are not tested to any standards. One battery might be tested at 1 second pulse every minute, and another battery might be tested at 5-second pulses every 20 seconds. It's just not a safe rating to follow. So going back to the continuous rating of 30 amps of the VTC4, this means that you shouldn't draw more than 30 amps from the battery. If you're using a mech mod with an atomizer built at 0.1 ohms, for example, on paper you would be drawing 42 amps from a 30 amp battery. That would not be safe. Now, a lot of expert mech mod users would say that you would actually be drawing less due to voltage drop, but I wouldn't recommend pushing these limitations either way. Exceeding ratings isn't as big of a problem in a regulated device, but it can be. The Westinghouse batteries that I talked about earlier are a good example of a battery that wouldn't be safe to use in any vape device because they can't exceed 1.2 volts or 6 amps. And if you want to figure out what your atomizer will draw from the battery, particularly for mech mod users, use an Ohm's law calculator to figure it out. And I like the calculator at steam-engine.org. All right, tip number 6, do not drop batteries. And if you do, inspect for damage. I've talked about this a little bit before, and basically if the battery dents, you risk having an internal short. For one, a dent in the top of the battery can cause the positive contact to touch the venting disc. Also, there are many layers within a battery, and a dent can cause these layers to touch each other or fold over. There's no way to know how big of a dent might cause a short, but you should probably just buy a new battery if you drop it. If you don't feel like your battery has suffered a big enough fall to worry about, just make sure to check for a torn wrap. If any of that battery is exposed beneath the wrap, rewrap it or buy a new one. All right, tip number 7, do not subject batteries to extreme temperatures. So extreme temperatures include both cold and hot. At temperatures below freezing or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, charging a battery can cause plating of metallic lithium, which is permanent damage and makes the battery vulnerable to failure from vibration or stress. The document from CASAA says that freezing a battery can cause the electrolytes to freeze and crack the battery, but from what I can find in my research, electrolytes in lithium-ion batteries will not freeze until it reaches negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's probably not likely unless you live in the coldest places of Russia. Now, as for extreme heat, charging or using batteries at high temperatures above 113 degrees Fahrenheit for prolonged periods of time will degrade the performance of the battery. Storing a battery above 104 degrees will result in anywhere from 15% to 35% permanent capacity loss after a year. All right, tip number 8, if the battery gets hot during use, stop. It's pretty typical for a battery to get warm while vaping, but if the battery gets hot, that's a problem. It could mean that you have a short. For example, the battery might be damaged or your atomizer might have a short somewhere. You might also be pushing your battery beyond its limits if the battery gets hot. If you do notice that the battery is hot, put it in a fire-safe place where it won't harm anyone until you know that it's safe. You should consider buying a new battery in this case, especially if you can't find the reason for the short. All right, tip number 9, use a quality charger designed for lithium-ion batteries. Using a cheap or low-quality charger might charge your batteries too fast, which could cause permanent damage. My recommendation would be to use a reputable charger from a company like Xtar, Nightcore, or eFest. That would be for external batteries. If you're charging a device with internal batteries, you should only use the manufacturer's recommended charger or charging cable. A cheap knockoff charger, either for external or internal batteries, could overcharge your batteries and cause a fire. Tip number 10, batteries should be replaced after a year. This is a recommendation from CASAA that is very conservative because batteries tend to last longer than a year, and even old batteries aren't likely to result in a dangerous situation. But it's good to know that after around a year, your batteries will hold less charge and might not last as long. So if you put high stress on your batteries, you might see poor performance after about 6 months. Okay, tip number 11, never use a battery with a damaged wrap. This is a serious issue that should not be ignored, and I see it happening all the time when I look at forums. A torn battery wrap, it exposes the metal of the battery, and that absolutely needs to be covered. If that exposed battery touches metal while the contacts are also touching metal, it will cause a short. So if you have a damaged wrap, you should either toss the battery or rewrap it yourself. You can get 10 wraps for really cheap. For 18650 batteries from imrbatteries.com, you can get them for 10 for $1. So they're not expensive by any means. I've also heard that you can use electrical tape, but keep in mind that not all electrical tape is created equal. You should only use something like Super 33 Plus electrical tape. I personally would never use electrical tape to fix a torn wrap, but I'm mentioning it just because I've seen people doing it, and I want to caution against using low quality electrical tape. All right, and I also wanted to offer 2 of my own tips. So tip number 12, don't charge overnight. Most chargers can detect when a battery is fully charged and will shut off, but malfunctions do happen, and a charger might keep going until the battery overheats and starts a fire. I never charge a battery overnight, and I try to only charge my batteries when I'm in the same room as the batteries. All right, and finally, tip number 13. Use proper orientation in mechanical mods. So if the battery is placed into a mech mod upside down, current will flow through at almost 0 resistance and will immediately exceed amp limits of that battery. So definitely make sure that your batteries are in the right position, especially for mech mods. Most regulated devices have protections in place for that. So those are the basic tips that you should know.